Adam, are we ready? Okay. Good afternoon. I am Portland City Councilor Dan Ryan. Welcome to the second Portland Children's Levy Allocation Committee meeting of 2025. Today I'm joined by Multnomah County Commissioner Megan Moyer, and also city-appointed community member Charity Kreider, county-appointed community member Felicia Tripp, and community sector, private sector representative Dan Floyd. It's great to have all of you with us today. And I'm also joined by the amazing staff at the Children's Levy. There's Erica, Joel, John, Meg, Lisa, Katrina, Brian, and Yusheng. Thank you all for joining us today. Now, on to our agenda. First up, let's approve the minutes from the February 12th meeting. May I ask for a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Felicia. And any second?
Second.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
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 Everyone said aye. All right. So that's been approved. At this point, we usually go right to public comment on non-agenda items. However, we're not accepting that type of testimony today. Instead, all applicants for large grants were offered the opportunity to submit written, audio, or video testimony. Allocation committee members received all testimony on April 8th in time for us to review it in front of today's meeting. So thank you all for, of course, doing that homework, and thank you for the staff for making it so easy for us to get on that assignment. So first item that we will review in the funding process, we have Community Engagement Coordinator Katrina and Grant Manager Erica and PCL Director Lisa will all review the funding process and review the facilitation process for today's decision making. Welcome to the floor. We have Katrina, Erica, everyone that was mentioned is now coming up, including Director Pellegrino. The floor is yours.
Welcome, everyone. You can go to the next slide. So we would like to start today by recapping the 2 years of planning, implementation, and community engagement and input that went into this funding process. Community engagement and input were integrated throughout the process. As you can see on the slide, we began with launching a new 13-member community council in 2023. The council was formed in response to community engagement results and recommendations from the prior 2019-2020 funding round. Council members have lived and professional experiences reflective of the communities served by PCL funding. Our next few slides will review the major phases in this funding process. After, we will summarize how staff created funding recommendations in advance of this meeting. We also want to remind everyone that on March 7th, applicants received staff funding recommendations for the program area where they applied, key data, and a brief summary of each application in the program area, and a guide to staff's funding recommendations. Our slides today will cover a high level of summary of what was sent to applicants in early March. We'll end the presentation with an orientation to how staff will facilitate the allocation committee's decision-making today. So after launching the community council, PCL staff collaborated with council members to determine community engagement goals, key topics, and priority populations. PCL's community engagement process was led by Camille E. Trummer Consulting in collaboration with PKS International Community Engagement Liaisons. This process started in the fall of 2023 and wrapped up in the spring of 2024. They used surveys, focus groups, and interviews to engage 760 community members and service providers across Portland. Among the 509 people who responded to the community survey, more than 70% identified as Black, Indigenous, and people of color. More than 50% lived in households earning less than $500,000 a year. 50,000, thank you. And more than 50% had a preferred language other than English. In fact, engagement was conducted in more than 25 languages. Staff worked with the Community Council and the Allocation Committee to take community engagement results and shape them into funding priorities in each of PCL's 6 program areas. A funding priority is the type of direct service for children and families that the levy will be funding in this round. All applicants for funding were required to address at least one of the funding priorities in their application. So this slide offers reminders about the application and the review process. Staff worked with the Community Council in the fall of 2023 and the winter of 2024 to shape application questions and scoring criteria. Application questions and scoring criteria focused on an organization's experience with serving children and families and their impact on racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, on program design and the program's alignment with PCL funding priorities and their ability to deliver effective programming for priority populations, and on the grant budget for the proposed program. As a result of their work, approximately 70% of the available points on an application focused on issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. The Community Council also recommended that the Portland Children's Levy continue engaging community volunteers to read and score applications. Staff recruited and trained 96 community volunteers with lived and professional experience in PCL's program areas, priority populations, and equity, diversity, and inclusion. This was 50% more reviewers than our last funding round in 2019-2020. Some reviewers withdrew due to unexpected family emergencies. As a result, 91 reviewers completed all the reviews, resulting in 4 reviewers reading and scoring each application. The final score on each application is the median of 4 reviewers' scores. In March 2025, PCL staff sent each applicant a summary of their score forms along with reviewer comments. So we know that using only application score for decision-making has shortcomings. For example, some applications score highly due to strong grant writing, but the proposed program may have performance challenges. Similarly, some applications score low due to lack of grant writing experience, though they may deliver effective programming and services. Staff worked with the Community Council to prioritize application characteristics in relation to score. Council members discussed and responded to 3 questions. Voting results are listed on this slide and show the priorities of a majority or close to a majority of Community Council members. And the numbers in parentheses show the number of council members that voted for a priority out of the total number of voting council members. At a high level, Council prioritized applications that focus on serving Black and Indigenous children and families of color, along with a range of other priority populations such as LGBTQIA2S+, immigrant and refugee, and disability. The Council also prioritized applications from small organizations or from organizations without PCL funding, and they prioritized applications that focus on serving 1 to 2 specific racial or ethnic PCL priority populations and our 1 to 2 other PCL priority populations. The Community Council deprioritized applications from large organizations, programs that serve general PCL priority populations with no specific focus population, and from current grantee organizations for a program that PCL does not currently fund.
Thank you, Katrina. At this point, we want to remind everyone of the financial context and resources available for this funding round. Current annual budgets for large grants total $27.2 million. The projected annual budget for large grants over the next 3 fiscal years totals $21.56 million per year. That means that on an annual basis, starting this next fiscal year, total funds available for large grants will decline approximately 21% each year. This decline is the result of PCL spending down a fund balance that was invested in grants over the past 5 years, plus a decrease in projected property tax over the next 3 years. At the same time that PCL has declining funds, we saw increased demand for our grants. PCL received 168 total applications this time, a 45% increase over the last funding round in 2019-2020. 222 million in total funding was requested over 3 years, nearly double the amount requested in 2019. We received more than $3 in requests for every $1 of grant funding available. The number of applications from organizations without PCL grants tripled compared to 2019. Staff made funding recommendations in the context of substantially declining funds and a 45% increase in applications. This means that today's decisions are difficult choices. PCL staff created funding recommendations using 3 main factors that you see here. Application score, resulting from 4 community volunteer reviewers, community council priorities described earlier in the presentation by Katrina. Please keep in mind that these priorities do not mean that PCL would not recommend applications that were not priorities. PCL's community council priorities were priorities, not requirements. And also other criteria that were published in the funding application last fall. Those criteria in the funding application explain that staff recommendations would prioritize high-scoring applications, address PCL funding priorities and priority populations, support a diversity of organizations to serve the community, balance support between currently funded programs and programs not currently funded by PCL, consider the scale and feasibility of the proposed program in the context of the amount of funds requested, and the experience and expertise of the program and/or agency. They would consider the program cost per participant in the context of the level of service provided to participants, and consider program performance as a current PCL grantee where that applies. Recommended funding amounts for current grantee programs take into account performance trends, including the severity and persistence of any performance concerns, the spending history, and the need to balance investments to ensure all or as many priority populations as possible receive a range of levy-funded services. Programs with persistent and significant performance concerns were not recommended for continued funding. In recommending programs currently without PCL funding, staff prioritize applications from organizations that are small, that scored at or above median, that add services for priority populations, especially those underserved in a program area, and had few or no feasibility concerns. Recommended funding amounts take into account the proposal scale and budget, whether all program components are recommended for funding, and the need to balance investments to ensure all or as many priority populations as possible receive PCL services. Staff also considered specific policy lenses in creating funding recommendations in each program. The policy choices were informed by the community engagement process and past PCL grant performance. In after school, we prioritize adding services with a strong track record of youth engagement and limited transportation barriers. In child abuse prevention and intervention, prioritize continuing and adding services with therapeutic elements to support family mental health. In early childhood, we prioritize services for families with infants and toddlers, including prenatal supports, since other local resources for children ages 3 to 5 have increased with the passage of Preschool for All. In foster care, we prioritize services supporting mental health for foster youth. In hunger relief, we prioritize adding services focused on serving Black children and families who have been underserved in this program area. And in mentoring, we prioritize adding services for 18 to 24-year-olds due to the expansion of the eligible service population in the program area.
Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry. I thought it would light up, but it doesn't. Thanks, Erica. Okay, so this slide reviews the allocation decisions made by this committee in June 2024. At that time, estimated resources of $72.8 million over the next 3 years, which includes projected revenue from the tax levy, projected fund balance, projected expenses for personnel, internal and external materials and supplies, and reserves. In June, the committee allocated $6 million to continue the Community Child Care Initiative, or we call CCI. CCI is a child care subsidy initiative that helps working families earning low incomes afford high-quality childcare and supplements the state's employment-related daycare subsidy and ensures that costs for families are covered in full. This allocation addresses the top priority that came out in the community engagement process in early childhood, and another priority that was very highly rated in after school. So that was kind of the policy background for why you all allocated those funds. Staff reviewed CCI's performance in more depth at the February Allocation Committee meeting and shared the results of family and child care providers surveys, which indicated that CCI successfully increased access to high-quality care and that both families and providers are highly satisfied with the program. Currently, all available subsidies are being used, and there is a wait list. The committee also allocated $1.5 million to continue funding the PCL's small grants program for the next 3 years. The Small Grants Fund was started to improve equity of access for smaller organizations that struggle to compete for large grants and to ensure funding access for organizations that arise out of the communities they serve. Current small grants run through fiscal year 26, so through the next 25-26 year, and a new small grants funding round is planned for later this year in 2025. The committee also allocated $600,000 over 3 years to continue offering training to grantees that support quality improvement and responsiveness of programs to children and families. And then the remaining $64.7 million in funds were allocated for this large grants process. So that's just reviewing, since I know not all committee members were here in June. I want to make sure that folks kind of remembered that that's how they allocated funds. So that $64.7 million was then allocated among the 6 program areas, which is part of the charge of the allocation committee to do before a funding round. So the committee chose to allocate program area funding as a range of available resources. The funding range allocated for each program area was based on the committee's policy priorities and also historical funding demand in each program area. This slide shows the number of applications received and recommended per program area, the 3-year funding amount requested and recommended, and the range of funds allocated per program area. As you can see, staff recommended allocating more than the high end of the range in mentoring, near the high end of the range for after school, and at the low end of the range for early childhood, hunger relief, and foster care, and under the low end of range for child abuse prevention and intervention. This approach helps address the relative demand among the program areas in terms of applications. It also helps address the community council priorities, as you just heard from Katrina, for small organizations and programs that haven't had levy funding. The programs that are smaller and haven't had levy funding were concentrated in the mentoring and after-school funding areas, program areas. Funding recommendations total $65 million, you'll see at the end of the slide. A current PCL grant unexpectedly ended on December 31st, 2024, and most of the unspent balance from that grant was allocated to this funding round. So that's why the totals are different from between June and now. Given the increased number of applications and the scale of requests in combination with the decrease in PCL's available resources, most recommended funding amounts are substantially less than what applicants requested. PCL understands that applicants receiving less funding than requested will not be able to provide the same scale of services in the application, and we will negotiate with applicants for delivery of services commensurate with the funds that were actually granted. Okay, as was said a few times already in this meeting, but we'll reiterate again here, the applicants were given the opportunity to submit testimony in support of their application between March 7th and April 4th. Applicants were allowed to submit either video, audio, or a written testimony, and the testimony was accepted in languages other than English, and PCL had a translation done and then provided to the committee. Testimony was submitted in support of 111 of the 168 applications. PCL staff compiled all that testimony and provided it to the allocation committee on April 8th. So I just want to emphasize, and I know this has been said before, I want to emphasize again, that in advance of today's meeting, each allocation committee member reviewed the summaries of all the applications that were submitted, and those summaries included the score, the funding priorities addressed by the application, the size of the applicant organization, and the age group and population focus for that program. They reviewed staff recommendations and our rationale, and the program performance information for all currently funded programs. And then they reviewed the testimony submitted by applicants. After reviewing all this information, allocation committee members indicated their individual funding preferences to staff using an Excel worksheet by program area. Staff has aggregated all the individual funding preferences by program area to help facilitate today's discussion. So the grant managers for each program area are going to come up and facilitate you all through the decision-making. And first, they will list all of the applications in a program area that all committee members had a preference to fund at the same amount. The committee will vote on these applications as a group. The chair, Councilor Ryan, will call for a motion and a second and discussion for each vote. If there are differing funding preferences on an application, or if a member indicated an abstention due to a conflict of interest, those applications will be considered individually. Staff will begin discussion of these applications by stating the name of the applicant and the organization and program, the number of committee members out of 5 who indicated a preference to fund the application, the funding amount, and whether anybody abstained from stating a funding preference on an application. Then staff will turn consideration of that individual application over to the chair to facilitate voting using the process that I just described. PCL Fiscal Analyst John Kelly will keep track on a spreadsheet of your decisions as you make them, and if necessary, update you on any balance left. If no committee member indicated an interest in funding an application, it is unlikely to be discussed today. We're going to begin decision-making with the after-school program area, and we'll go alphabetically through the rest. Child abuse prevention, and intervention, early childhood, foster care, hunger relief, and finally mentoring. Okay, final slide. I just want to remind allocation committee members that they're required to disclose conflicts of interest. A conflict of interest refers to a financial relationship between a committee member or immediate family of the committee member and the applicant organization. So it's your relationship, your family's relationship to the applicant organization. A financial relationship includes being an employee or a contractor of an applicant. And if you volunteer for an applicant organization, you are not required to disclose that as a conflict, although you may if you choose. Committee members with conflicts of interest will abstain from voting on applications where they have a conflict. If anyone has a conflict of interest with an applicant organization, can you state the conflict now, and then you can state it again when the application is considered? Go ahead.
That's my cue. Under hunger relief and the Sunshine Division, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest there with me having a business relationship with the Sunshine Division as a contractor. Thank you.
Anyone else? Just want to double check. No? Okay. Okay, I think I'm going to now pass it on to Brian. So Commissioner Brian, you are
Yes,
facilitating now.
yeah, welcome, Brian. State your full name and your role at the Children's Levy for the record, please. And then we will listen to the after-school area.
You bet. My name is Brian Schmenikoff, and I'm the grants manager for the after-school portfolio.
Thanks.
All right. So under staff recommendations, we're going to start with Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, or IRCO, for the INSPIRE program. Staff recommendation at $1,611,000. 5 out of 5 council members indicated a preference to fund at that level. Then we have Girls Inc. of the Pacific Northwest with their Girls Groups program. 5 out of 5 members indicated a preference to fund it at $300,000 level. We have Impact Northwest for their core high school program. 5 out of 5 committee members indicated the preference to fund at the $368,000 level. We have the Metropolitan Family Service Sun Community Schools program. 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at the $442,000 level. Human Solutions, DBA Our Just Future, for their LearnLinks program. 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at the $461,000 level. We have the Latino Network After School Education Access Program, or EAP program. 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at $403,000 level. Pathfinders of Oregon, For the Pathfinder Club, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at $465,000 level. Am I going too fast, John? Okay. Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, IRCO, Sun Community Schools Program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at $411,000. Native American Youth and Family Center, the NAYA Family Center After School Program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at the $555,000 level. My Voice Music for the MVM Studios Music Program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at the $300,000 level. Portland Playhouse Social Justice Theater Program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at the $660,000 level. Self-Enhancement Incorporated, or SEI, for their culturally specific after-school support program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at $1,443,000 level. Impact Northwest, AKA Science Program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at $444,000 level. Portland Tennis and Education for the PT&E after-school program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at the $475,000 level. Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center and Rosemary Anderson High School, POIC, for their after-school program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at the $324,000 level. Pacific Refugee Support Group after-school program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference for the $466,000 level. The Blueprint Foundation for the after-school WISE program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at the $525,000 level. Bravo After-School Music Program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at the $322,000 level. Hacienda Community Development Corporation, Expresiones After School, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at the $607,000 level. Black Oregon Land Trust for their Ancestral Agricultural Education Program, 5 out of 5 committee members indicated a preference to fund it at the $300,000 level. And the Somali American Council of Oregon, or SACO, Club Bottle, $425,000 level. 5 out of 5 committee members indicated that preference.
Thank you, Brian. And you got everything you needed, John? Great. So we could do this, actually, you want us to vote on everything after we hear all 6, correct?
I believe we're voting on each program area separately.
We could do it by each one right now.
One more time.
Okay, try one again. Yes, by program area. We'll take a vote by program area. So a motion, a second, and a vote by program
Okay,
area.
and then we'll go on to the next one after this.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
so thank you. We received the staff report. It was very thorough, and we had a lot of thorough work prior to this, of course. And now the item is open for discussion. First of all, would we like to receive the motion, and do we have a second for discussion? Okay, I moved the motion, and it was seconded, and now it's open for discussion. Thank you. Any comments you'd like to make, discussions? You can also save your comments when you vote. It's up to you. And we'll vote individually today as opposed to just a call out for all yeses.
I'll go ahead and speak now. I just, to zoom out a bit on all program areas, want to recognize all the hard work and effort put into the applications by the community-based organizations, and there were so many moving testimonials, and I see personally the impact that a lot of these programs have in my community and beyond. And this is not an easy decision, as it's been laid out with limited finite resources, but want to recognize all the efforts on your behalf, and then the efforts of the Portland Children's Levy to make this process so thorough and transparent every step of the way, so I could feel confident in the recommendations that were made. That was especially for the after-school programs, because of the high need. It was hard to decide between the options that were available and not be able to fund things fully. So I just want to acknowledge that and the gratitude I have for all the work that's being done.
Thank you, Charity. Anyone else like to make any comments on this section before they vote? Yes?
Yeah, I'll comment. My comments are mainly general, so I think I'll do my best not to repeat myself when we get to the other areas. I just wanted to, I want to make a point about this. It appears like it's a rubber stamp because we're all voting. We got fives across the board here. I want to make it clear that a lot of time went into this, and I have a great deal of respect for the process that played out here and the list of various groups of people and staff members that we need to respect the work that they put into this and the time and the amount of people that had a voice. And so getting to this point, and I told our chair here yesterday that I got to a point where I felt like I was searching for a reason to have a discussion here today or to go against staff recommendations. And that's the point where I know that I'm doing things for the wrong reasons. And so it just brought me back to respecting this process. So thank you for that. And I'll probably, one more comment on this area because it came to my thought almost immediately. There's so many great after-school programs that I want to support. We know that the funding's limited, but also in doing the homework and reading the staff recommendations, I anticipated supporting some groups that were not funded based off their testimony and was a little bit disappointed in some organizations that I wanted to support that did not submit testimony, or when they did submit testimony, it didn't specifically address the concerns that came from the entire process. And so I think there's an opportunity as we move forward to a future grant cycle to have those discussions and better potentially prepare organizations for that testimony round. So I'll leave it at that for right now.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Any comments this way? Felicia?
Yes, so I just want to also give kudos to staff and community members. And as the longest serving allocations committee member, I want to give us a little bit of history and context. Like Dan, I read every single application in the comment section. I listened to every single video. I read every single testimony. So as Dan was saying, this was not a rubber stamp process. But what I am really impressed with is every time we have an allocations process, we actually go out and have people review our process. And in the last process, the reviewers gave us some recommendations, and I'm really proud that we actually implemented those recommendations. And some of the ones I really want to highlight that they recommended from the last cycle were three things. One is they were saying that they were not applicants ready for the large grant process, so we needed to create a small grants process. That was a recommendation. We implemented that. Two, they said that before it got to the allocations committee, we should make sure that we had a community council that was representative of the organizations and the communities in which we're applying. That was also done. They asked us to widen the pool of reviewers and making sure that we even had a more diverse representation in the pool along all the lines, whether it's geographic footprint or racial footprint or sexual orientation or immigration status. That was done. Those are not easy things to do. And I really want to emphasize how much work behind the scenes it took over the last 3 years. And the part that we briefly covered, which was all the focus group community survey work that was also done, all of that was also taken into account. After school was by far my toughest area to be able to make funding recommendations because we know it's one of the highest needs, as the city is really balancing the cuts that are going to happen in our park system, as the county is really looking at the SUN program. So I just want everybody to know that this whole allocation committee really took that into consideration. And Dan is right, we did not rubber stamp any of this. We actually thoroughly read, and I agree with Dan, for some of the concerns that were raised, I think in public testimony in the future, one of the things I would really recommend is being able to have applicants really be able to address that. So thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. Commissioner, would you like to say anything?
I mean, not to be repetitive, but I was extremely impressed with the process that got us even to staff recommendations. I certainly sent my fair share of questions, and I appreciated staff response. I have to say the process that got to these recommendations was one in which I felt like stayed true to the prioritization and the marching orders, if you will, that were laid out. And so, I think in my review, I was looking to see if I fundamentally disagreed with any recommendation, largely trying to be blind to organizational name or reputation. And I really could not find fault in the process. And to me, that's incredibly important that it be fair and consistent and evenly applied. And I felt like that was well documented and explained. And when I did have questions, I really appreciated the answers that I received. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add that I've been on the other end of asking for money for most of my career, and so I have a lot of opinions on guidelines and how they're implemented with fidelity. I've never experienced anything quite like this. It was, and I'm pretty good about trying to poke a hole somewhere, and you couldn't. It was like every time I would have a thought, there was a really thorough answer, and it was all documented as well. So I want to just lift this as a best practice. We have a lot of improvement to do in the city, and I can speak to that in terms of how we make these type of decisions when we're giving money investments out to the community, which we should do. There should be partnerships, but none of them come close to this level of accountability and transparency. So I do want to echo what's been said today. It's truly an honor to be chairing this allocation committee when the staffing model that shows up does what they say they were going to do based on the feedback they received. I think I just want to also, in my overarching comments, say it was sobering. It's sobering to know 21% was already cut, before we even started. I know that was hard for all of us. And then to hear once again how the needs are up and the availability of funds are down. In this particular area, I want to acknowledge that this is an area that I've focused on quite a bit in my career. All Hands Raised was all about the time away from the bell schedule and how can the community wrap around with our K-12 institutions, if you will, and provide some extra support. So we're always a partner with after-school programs. What we've experienced with them since COVID has been very sobering. We were in these meetings having long discussions about how challenging it was for our partners to connect with our students when our school districts locally especially were the ones that were that were not doing in-person learning the longest, and those behaviors of patterns of families and children changed. And it's been sad to watch how slow it's been to get some of those necessary systems back up and running. And I've appreciated how this staff has worked diligently with your partners to help them and understand and empathize with what they were going through. So I've noticed that throughout the last few years, how diligent you've been to work with our partners in the after-school programs to help understand how we can keep improving post-COVID. So I say that as a big picture around this area. So it was probably of all the areas that gave me the most heartache. One, because of the conditions that have been persisting too long since COVID, and then two, the need and the equation there. So I think with that, we can just go quickly to the vote. I think a lot of people did their remarks with their comments just now. but let's just go ahead and do the vote. We've had a first and second. Any more discussion? Start with you, Tierney, your vote.
Yes vote.
Yes. Aye or nay or
Aye.
no, either one.
Aye.
A pirate vote.
Aye.
Aye.
And I as well. So that passes 5-1. Okay, we're on to the next area. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much.
And now, John, you stay up there. The bean counter stays there, right? All right. Joel, you're up next.
Yes.
Your full name and your specific role at the Children's Levy.
Yeah, my name is Joel Broussard, and I'm the Child Abuse Prevention, Intervention, and Foster Care Program Grant Manager for Portland Children's Levy. All right, so first up, we have the YWCA of Greater Portland, the Healing Together Program. 5 out of 5 ODU agreed with the recommended amount of $642,000. Next up, Volunteers of America, Oregon, the Family Relief Nursery. 5 out of 5 ODU agreed with the recommended amount of $934,000. Urkel, Child Abuse Prevention and Intervention Program. 5 out of 5 of you agreed with the recommended amount of $971,000. Impacts Northwest Safe Families, Safe Communities Program. 5 out of 5 of you agreed with the recommended amount of $555,000. El Program Hispano, Cultural Responsive Trauma Recovery Program. 5 out of 5 of you agreed with the $642,000. Family Skill Builders In-Home Parenting Program. 5 out of 5 of you agreed with the recommended amount of $300,000. Northwest, the DHS Contracts Team Program. 5 out of 5 of you agreed with the recommended amount of $750,000. Bradley Engel, Interrupting Cycles of Violence Program. 5 out of 5 of you agree with the recommended amount of $628,000. CARES Northwest, Trauma Focused Therapy Program. 5 out of 5 of you agreed with the recommended amount of $687,000. Bridge Metals, Intergenerational Interventions Program. 5 out of 5 of you agree with the recommended amount of $351,000. Youth Rights and Justice, the Family Defense Project. 5 out of 5 of you agreed with the recommended amount of $462,000. Lutheran Community Services Northwest, Parenting in Portland Program. 5 out of 5 of you agree with the recommended amount of $681,000. Janus Youth Programs, Insights Seeds Program. 5 out of 5 of you agree with the recommended amount of $754,000. POIC, Rosemary Anderson High School, the Youth Parent Program. 5 out of 5 of you agreed the recommended amount of $503,000. Pathfinders of Oregon Center for Family Success. 5 out of 5 of you agree with the recommended amount of $1,046,000. LifeWorks Northwest Family and Community Alliance Program. 5 out of 5 of you agreed the recommended amount of $875,000. And then LifeWorks Northwest Children's Relief Nursery Program. 5 out of 5 of you agree with the recommended amount of $1,709,000.
Thank you, Bruce. Sorry, I just called you the name that's not yours. Your name is Joel, and your name related to Bruce. This town is small. Let's go ahead and have some discussion in the child abuse prevention intervention applications, if there's any. I know some of us did big, broad-reaching comments in the last ones. Any specific comments about this area in particular? Oh, first we have a motion. I'm going to move that we to accept the staff report. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Now we're in discussion. Felicia, I saw you motioning to say something.
I was going to say, this one was probably a little bit easier for me because I'm happy that we were able to fund a significant amount of this priority area. And to me, it was, we started with the toughest, which was after school, but we were able to fund a significant amount of this priority area. And reviewing these applications, again, there's nothing that I could counter in the staff or the community recommendations.
Thank you, Felicia.
I just want to add that the process that the staff has went through for each of the 6 program areas is meticulous. I've not seen anything like that in all the grant reviews I've been involved in over the years. It's very impressive, and every question I had along the way, which is, and just to reiterate what's already been said, was answered and then answered again in great detail and a lot of thought and due diligence. What I really looked for in child abuse prevention was parenting support and wraparound services, and I saw that strong in the applications. That was encouraging. So I feel like with the rest of the program areas, just really confident in how collaboratively and the integrity that staff went through the process together to reach these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Charity. Commissioner, you good? Okay, good. Okay. I just wanted to reflect on some stories again back after when we were in the middle of COVID and many of our students were at home, and we had conversations about how the reporting on child abuse was way down. And it was reported in different ways in the media. And it was so refreshing to have dialogue in this committee about the fact that there's underreporting because the teachers in our schools are often the intelligence that helps provide such referrals. And so I'm so sensitive to this work area ever since that meeting that we had a few years ago. And so I'm so happy that you picked partners that are working really well with the schools, because I think that relationship between the schools and the partners was spelled out so clearly during COVID. And so I wanted to acknowledge that. Okay, now it's time for our vote. We have a first and second. No more discussion. We'll start this way. Felicia.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
And I as well. And so the second package does pass fully funded by staff recommendation. We're up to our third area, early childhood. And Meg, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Meg McElroy. I'm the Assistant Director with the Children's Levy, and I work with our early childhood and hunger relief grant portfolios. So I will walk you through your preferences for early childhood. There were 11 applications that 5 out of 5 of you showed a preference to fund at the staff recommended funding amount. The first one is Latino Network for their early childhood Juntos Aprendemos program for a funding amount of $1,099,000. The second is Impact Northwest for their parent-child development services for a funding amount of $845,000. The next one is ERCO for their Child and Parent Success, or CAPS program, for $1,670,000. $1,675,000. Thanks. Fourth one, Morrison Child and Family Services for their Listos para Aprender program for $1,724,000. Next, Albina Head Start for their early Head Start classroom-based services for $2,649,000. Next, Apano Communities United Fund for their early childhood wellness program for $500,000. Morrison Child and Family Services for their infant and early childhood mental health program for $1,832,000. Metropolitan Family Service for their early Ready, Set, Go program for ages infant to 2 for $360,000. NEA Family Center for their early childhood program for $563,000. The Black Parent Initiative for the First 1,000 Days program for $506,000. And finally, Hacienda CDC for their Sembrando Semillitas program for $550,000.
Thank you, Meg. I will go ahead, and that's your complete list.
That's the complete list.
I will move to accept the staff recommendation for early childhood. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. And now it's open for any discussion. Seeing none, All right, let's go to the vote.
Aye.
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 And I vote aye as well, and so that has been awarded we vote in unanimous on the early childhood. We're in the fourth area, foster care.
Yes.
Good
All
back,
right.
Joel. All right.
So I'll take a page out of Meg's book. So there are 12 program areas in which all 5 of you agreed with the recommended amounts. So the first one is Urkel Foster Care Program at the recommended amount of $730,000. New Avenues for Youth, Avenues to College and Workforce Program at the recommended amount of $901,000. Janus Youth Program, Insights Echo Program at the recommended amount of $624,000. PRC, RAHS, Mental Health Services for Foster Care Youth Program at the recommended amount of $580,000. Self Enhancement Incorporated Foster Care Support Program at the recommended amount of $503,000. Native Family Center Foster Care Support Program at the recommended amount of $795,000. Youth Rights and Justice Schoolworks Program at the recommended amount of $724,000. Youth Progress Association Older Youth Program at the recommended amount of $472,000. Dougie Center Light Program at the recommended amount of $668,000. Kinship House Mental Health Therapy Program at the recommended amount of $539,000. Boys and Girls Aid Permanency Services at the recommended amount of $673,000. And finally, Friends of the Children Mentoring Program for Foster Care Youth at the recommended amount of $759,000.
Thank you, Joel. I will move to accept the staff recommendation for foster care. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, any discussion in this area?
I have a comment. We, as a allocation committee, said we would really like to see the whole entire age spectrum funded, and I think that was accomplished with this allocation funding year. I was really impressed by the age span, services that were going to be offered to provide as supports. And you really listened not only to community members, but also to the allocation committee members as well, because we did emphasize that please be able to look at foster care over the whole entire spectrum and not forget that our older foster youth also need services. And I just want to say, it was one of the things I really appreciated most about this particular priority area.
Thank you, Felicia. Yes.
Yeah, that's helpful for me too, because you realize there's so many other priorities that we need to take into account besides for the score that's on the left of the sheet. And growing up and playing sports all my life, I'm looking at the score saying, okay, you won, you scored 140. But there's so much, there's a process that was in place. And also there are other ways of scoring these grant applications. So it was difficult for me when I first looked at that score, but also noticed that, and it was brought to my attention that I was applying possibly my own criteria to the scoring and to the funding here, rather than the agreed upon criteria and process that we've all said we're going to support. So that's how I got to it, and it just reminded me that it's not just about the score right here, but a number of other priorities. So thank you, Felicia.
Dan. I just want to echo what I heard from you, Felicia. We had some really good conversations about the importance. We all know that our society creates quite a cliff at age 18, which barely works for 18-year-olds that have a lot of support at home. And it definitely doesn't work for those that do not. So I really appreciate that we keep having that dialogue. And actually, to go back to the last one, I want to acknowledge former allocation committee member and now chair of Multnomah County government, Jessica Vega-Peterson, for helping us look at early childhood and how we can look at it differently now that we passed pre-K for all. And that did allow us to look at some more focus on 18 to 24-year-old as a big general topic. So sometimes when you tune in and you're just seeing this score, please know it's been like a multiple year dialogue to get us to this place. And again, we're not rubber stamping because we've been in those conversations for multiple years about how to get to this point. So now our vote. Why don't we go ahead? I can't remember. Anyone's start. You go, Felicia.
Aye.
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 And I vote aye as well. And so we have accepted the staff recommendation for foster care. We're on to hunger relief. And it's Meg. Hi, Meg.
Hi. All right. In this program area, there were 13 applications where 5 out of 5 of you had a preference to fund the application at the staff recommended amount. And then there is one application that we'll discuss separately because one of you disclosed earlier your conflict of interest with that application. So we'll take the first group of 13. Starting with ERCO for their school-based hunger relief services for a recommended funding amount of $846,000. The next one is Our Just Future, LearnLinks Food Pantries for $300,000. Growing Gardens for their culturally responsive garden programming for $467,000. Metropolitan Family Service for their school-based food pantries for $505,000. Meals on Wheels for their Meals for Kids program for $2,391,000. Oregon Food Bank for their school-based pantry program for $1,630,000. Familias en Acción for their hunger relief program for $661,000. Kairos PDX for their hunger relief school-based program for $300,000. POIC and Rosemary Anderson High School school-based and community-based nutrition program for $300,000. Black Food Sovereignty Coalition for their intergenerational connection program for $450,000. Community Development Corporation of Oregon for their locally grown food security program for $500,000. Feed 'em Freedom Foundation for their Black Community Food Hub for $450,000. And Neighborhood House Free Food Market Program for $300,000.
Meg. And will you continue?
That's the group of 13, yes, where there are 5 out of 5 of you who had this same preferred amount. So you could do a motion and a second and discussion on this one, and then
that's why
we'll
we
do
have
the
to
one.
separate it. Got it. Okay.
We'll
So
do the
you all heard that. I move that we will receive the staff recommendation for all but one, which we'll get to later, of those that were scored with all of us agreeing with it. That's a really long motion. The motion is to say we recommend staff recommendation. We'll come back to that one later. This is funky. Can't the person just not, we have to do it so they can't vote on just that one?
Correct.
Okay, but we don't want them to not vote on the rest of it.
It would be procedurally easier for you to vote on the 13 for which all 5 of you are eligible to vote together, and then to have the one that somebody needs to abstain be voted on separately.
Exactly. That's the motion. Who will second it?
Second.
It was so good, everyone wanted to second it. Okay, any discussion? Well,
I would just like to add how grateful I am that this is a funding category, because how very real this situation is in our community, but also taking into account some federal policy changes on the horizon and that have already been implemented makes this an even more urgent need. And I am glad to see that we are investing in this area.
thank you, Commissioner. Very timely, fortunately. Anything else? All right, let's go ahead and vote. Charity?
Aye.
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 And I vote aye as well. So we have accepted the staff's recommendations in hunger relief.
And so now we do
items that were voted with 5. All right. Now we have the final one.
Perfect. And the last one, so there are 4 out of 4 of you who had a preference to fund this application at a funding amount of $300,000, and the application is Sunshine Division for their food distribution to the Community Transition School and to children and families.
Okay. I move that we accept the recommendation from staff to support Sunshine Division with the recommended amount of 300,000. Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Yes,
And
Dan?
I am the somebody here, so I need to abstain because of conflict of interest as a contractor with the Sunshine Division.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead and vote. We'll go for Charity.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So that, therefore, we have passed on the recommendation to fund Sunshine Division at 300,000. Thank you, Meg. Is this our final one? Yes, it is. Mentoring. Erica, welcome. Your full name and your specific role for the public record, please.
Okay, my name's Erica Bridgman-Vignoli. I'm the grant manager for the mentoring grants and also for the small grants. And I'm here with the mentoring grants. We have 19 grants that all of you have indicated that you prefer to fund at the same level. I will start with IRCO Refugee and Immigrant Mentoring Program at the level of $1,023,000. Next, we have the Latino Network Mentoring EAP Program at the level of $750,000. Next, we have the Latino Network Padrinos Mentorship Program, the level of $487,000. Next, we have Portland Youth Builders Pathways Out of Poverty at the level of $900,000. Next is Open School Incorporated, their Step Up program, the level of $1,285,000. Next is the Pair Creative Mentorship Program, the level of $500,000. Next is Friends of the Children, PDX Portland Mentoring Program, the level of $1,347,000. Next is Portland Workforce Alliance Mentoring Program, the level of $300,000. Next is Elevate Oregon Building Relationships, the level of $400,000. Then we have the Ethiopian and Eritrean Cultural Resource Centers Tomorrow's Leaders Program at $400,000. Next, we have Outside In Youth Services Program, the level of $685,000. Next, we have Going Home To Triple Threat Mentoring, the level of $500,000. Then we have Hala Mentors Expanding Mentorship in East Portland, the level of $410,000. Then we have ELSO Inc. Tap and Roots Program, the level of $300,000. Then we have NEA Family Center College and Career Readiness Program at $493,000. Then we have Cairo Project to Educate, Empower, and Reframe African Leadership Program at $400,000. Then we have the Samoa Pacific Development Corporation, their Inspire program at $473,000. $573,000. Then we have Pathfinders of Oregon Mentoring Inside Out at $455,000. And finally, we have Lewis and Clark University's Transactive Gender Project, PDX, at $300,000.
Thank you, Erica. I move that we receive the staff recommendations, accept the staff recommendations on mentoring. Do I have a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion in the area of mentoring.
I'm going to say this was hard like after school because we all know the need and demand. And again, I had to really focus on the priorities. And and this one really also went down to really reevaluating what the community council said, as far as priority populations. And this is where public testimony really came into play as well for me. And after reviewing all of that, and what many of you have said, really checking if I had any biases or if there was something that I countered with anybody, because there were so many applications in here. But I had no disagreement with what was recommended by community and staff.
I would just echo what Felicia said. And I wondered with after school and mentoring about overlap of services, and I wanted to dig more into that. And of course, staff answered all of my questions and reassured me about the distribution that was recommended by council, community council, and the priorities. And it's just, it's difficult because so many of the testimonials are moving, and more, I wish there were more resources for it. But I'm also have high confidence in what has been recommended and what can be done with the money that we do have.
A lot of echoes on this one. I think this was a topic that we've had a lot of attention on this topic over the last few years for good reason. And I appreciate that we extended some of the, how much we were going to fund. So I could tell that it impacted the staff as well. I also want to acknowledge in this area, I really experienced some newer grants coming online and how hard that was to do this year and how important it is to keep things fluid like that. And so I just acknowledged in this area, there's a few programs, and that was good. I knew too many of these programs for a long time, you might say. And so to see some newer programs, because I don't know all the people in this space, and the fact that you've been doing engagement work, much of it through the Small Grants Program, I really was able to notice that in this area, perhaps more than any other. So I wanted to lift that as well. Any other discussion or comments before we vote? Okay. Charity?
Aye.
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 I vote aye, and we have unanimously accepted the staff recommendations for mentoring. Okay. Well, look at that. We got through all 6. John Kelly, you have been up there the entire time.
Just to say out loud, you just allocated $64,976,000 over 3 years.
Wow.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, can we give a round of applause to our staff at the Portland Children's Levy for such hard work? There's many people at home watching that were clapping as well. Okay, so next. I already did all that. We're on to item number 3, and that's why Director Pellegrino is up there. And it is a summary of the next steps and an update on the City of Portland's government transition. Gee, I can't wait to hear your perspective. I'll leave
refrain
the
from
room.
saying too much. I just want to say thank you all for your appreciations and for all the hard work that was put in here. And I just want to personally state that it is always really moving to me, and I've been doing this a long time, to go through this process and to be humbled by all the incredible work that's going on in our community that is evidenced by 168 programs that are happening right now as we speak to try to support children and families. So it gives me faith in humanity, which we really need right now in light of our federal situation, that people are trying to help each other out there. So thanks again to all of you. I know you put in a lot of hours, and I appreciate that. I want to just review briefly so you all understand, and so that the viewing public understands too, that the final step in our funding process is the review and approval by City Council. Staff will be submitting the Allocation Committee's decisions today and a request for a council hearing date. All of PCL's current grants expire on June 30th, 2025, so I just want to be clear about that. Any continuing funding for currently funded programs cannot be accessed until and unless the council approves the Allocation Committee decisions. So I'm saying that partly for your benefit and also for the benefit of all the folks who are listening. PCL staff will be requesting that council hearing date as soon as possible to hopefully avoid any disruption in continuing services, so hopefully we can get that heard promptly. And once we have a confirmed council hearing date and time, we'll publish that information on our website. I'm sorry, Commissioner Ryan, or Councilor Ryan, did you have something to say?
That's me looking at my chief of staff to find out if, in fact, we have confirmed a date and time with the council president. No? Okay,
We're working on it.
we're on it, yeah.
We're working on it. It's a very, as you know, it's budget season. It's very, very busy. I'm sure Dan Ryan is very cognizant of that.
But I wanted to say how important it is that we have the work sessions, is what we call them. And I might just put it into one of the meetings that I have some influence over from the agenda. And maybe, the reason being is because there's 11 new people. And this is a process. And of course, it's a town with a lot of relationships. So people are probably getting phone calls. And so we want them to really hear, like we've been able to, about how thorough this is. You know, when we did a round of applause for all of you, we were also applauding the volunteer readers. We're also the community council. So there's just so many accountability threads that went into this process and checks and balances. And it'll be so helpful for the new council to understand how that has gone into motion over the last year. So.
We'll do our best to educate. When we get
Well,
the opportunity.
I actually thought the way that this was presented today and the information, I think you have the artifact in terms of your presentation today. Didn't you all find it very helpful? I mean, a lot of us already knew it, but it was such a crisp summary, so thank you for that.
Yeah, well, good. It's been a 2-year process, so it takes a while, and it's helpful actually that a number of you are new, so you have to understand the process as you go, and you weren't there from the beginning. So we'll hope we have the same luck with the city council.
And I'll be also looking to invite all of you to that meeting, and so stay tuned. And we're being told that we should know by the end of the day, so.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, folks. The last is just an update on the governmental transitions. We've been, I know not all of you have been on the committee for as long as this has been going on, but we've been providing regular updates for its impact on PCL. So last year, PCL was made part of the Vibrant Communities Service Area that included Portland Parks and Recreation and the Office of Arts and Culture. At our February meeting, we let you all know that PCL was possibly going to be assigned to a different service area within the city, and this past month we received confirmation that the Vibrant Communities Service Area is going to be dissolved, and PCL and the Office of Arts and Culture will be moved to the Community and Economic Development Service Area. And for those of you who aren't in the service area, designations are intimately involved with city government. The groups or the bureaus that are in that service area are the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, which is where PCEF is housed and where we have some colleagues on the grant-making side. Also, the Permitting and Development, Housing Bureau, Prosper Portland, Spectator Venues and Visitor Activities, and the Enhanced Services Districts Program. So at this juncture, we don't have any updated information on how that will affect PCL's budget or cost structure for internal services. We are just now beginning to meet with the leadership in the new service area, and we'll hopefully have an update for you in June on that front. So that's the latest, and as I said, we hope to have more information over the next month or so as we proceed through the city budget process. Any questions about that? About what's upcoming?
And I think it's important to remember this is a restricted account, so that's a very good thing, especially this year.
Indeed, the Children's Levy proceeds do need to spend on the Children's Levy activities.
Yeah.
So we'll keep you updated as that goes, and that's the end.
Okay, that's it, right? So we're just wrapping up? Okay. Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining us here today. I want to really thank my colleagues for, I know, spending so many hours on this, and I know it gave me a chance to get to know the ecosystem of all the great organizations that are working with our children and youth, and also just to admire the work of the staff. I mean, it was said many times for the right reasons, so I hope that you're all feeling that appreciation. And again, this is the gold standard in this market on how to make decisions, tough decisions, that you can back up with data, you can back up with a process that's thorough, and communication that was very thorough with each applicant and very fair. So I just want to really lift that once again. And I hope that we can continue to spread these practices through the city with our other grant-making services that we'll learn from the North Star that you provide. So let's see. The agendas will be sent to the Levy email list, shared on our Facebook page. We just want you to know our next meeting is on Wednesday, June 18th, where we'll have some reflective conversations, getting back up on a higher elevation, and thinking about the criteria that we established, which really helped our lens as we made these decisions. And it's kind of close enough where we still have the memory, but a little bit of a break, so we're not too attached to one application. Does that make sense? Okay, so thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing you on June, whatever that date is that I said here, June 18th, and have a wonderful afternoon. This meeting is now adjourned.
No, we have to allow for extra time in case. A little bit of time left in the day.